students' government at Buffalo State or Buffalo State itself. Due to the opinionated nature of these programs, listener discretion is highly advised. If you have any questions or comments about today's program, you can give us a call at 716-878-5104.
To join Mr. Hare on today's Living for the People, dial 878-5104. That's 716-878-5104. Or go to facebook.com/91.3 WBNY and comment there. That's facebook.com/91.3 WBNY. Courtesy Breitbart.
Right, welcome to Living for the People. This is L. Nathan Hare. Welcome you to our broadcast, focused on providing you insight into the facts, into the events shaping our national and regional world, and examining the facts behind those events and policies that are shaping our world for today and for tomorrow. Join us weekly on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. following Amy Goodman's Democracy Now! Program. And of course, you know our program is live, so you can call and you can join our discussion. We really hope that you will. Our number here again is 716-878-5104. That's 716-878-5104. We're usually here with Norma Carter, who is our in-studio audience of one, but I guess he's still, is he recovering from his vacation, or is he still experiencing his vacation?
I think right now he's in another state, and I think he's going to New York City too.
So he's still experiencing his vacation.
Yeah, he's still.
So that means he'll come back with a vacation headache, right? And of course, we're here with Willie H., who is our engineer. He's our 21st century citizen. He does the live streaming of the program. Welcome, Willie.
Welcome everybody to Living for the People with L. Nathan Hare. Remember, guys, to call in 716-878-5104. That's 716-878-5104.
And while I got you all listening, before I get into today's discussion, I want to remind you again that there's a free conference, or I guess it's the right thing to say, or symposium on steps to recovering from cancer and other illnesses. This free event is going to be taking place at the Frank E. Merriweather Library in their auditorium at 1324 Jefferson Avenue. That's the corner of Jefferson Avenue and East Utica Street in Buffalo.
Right across from Apollo Theater.
Right across from, well, yeah, exactly. Right across from the Apollo Theater.
I used to work there.
You know, because you're the 21st century guy. you're the person. But this is going to be this Thursday coming up, August 24th. It's from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. They're asking people to register so they have a good idea of how many people they got to prepare packets for. Mm-hmm. The number is 716-603-5979. That's 716-603-5979. The conference is being sponsored, and the person you'll be hearing from is Dr. Maurice Howard. He's a PhD psychologist. He himself actually contracted cancer several years ago. Wow. He was at the stage where he actually clinically died 3 different times. And they were able to bring him back because medicine today is a lot different than it was when I was a child. And they were able to resuscitate him. But, you know, all those things that tell you that you're gone, you know, the brain waves, the heart stopping and all that stuff all happened to him. And they brought him back 3 different times. If you see him now, you'd never know he ever had cancer. So he's talking about, you know, why it's so important for you to be connected to a healthcare professional, a general physician, or somebody who's performing general physician duties for you, that you are connected to somebody like that who themselves are a part of a medical healthcare network, so that you can be monitored, you can keep up with yourself, and when something untoward is beginning to happen in you, somebody will know about it within 2, 3, or 4 months, and they can do something about it when it's still doable. Right. You don't want to wait until it's uncontrollable and then try to do something about it. Right. And the only way you can know is if you're getting yourself assessed on a regular basis. So please give this an opportunity. Give yourself this opportunity.
That's this Friday, you said?
That's me. This Thursday.
Thursday coming up.
This Thursday coming up, August 24th. It's from 5:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. at the Frank E. Merriweather Library at the intersection of Jefferson Avenue and East Utica. It's 1324 Jefferson Avenue. It's called The Steps to Recovering from Cancer and Other Illnesses. It is something that I think every one of us should be paying attention to. Yeah. You can register again, 716-603-5979. That's 716-603-5979. And the conference is being presented by psychologist Dr. Maurice Howard. Hope you all have an opportunity to be there. So I want to take today's discussion. You know, we've been rambling around on the fourth indictment of the former president, twice indicted former president. Is it twice indicted, and how many other things? Four times indicted now.
Mr.
Twice impeached.
Wow.
Former president of the United States. We've been talking about that fourth indictment and all the things that led up to it and what the indictment involves. But I wanted to put another kind of, take on this thing, because there's always these little other stories that are behind the big story. You remember this guy named Brad Raffensperger. He was the Secretary of State for the state of Georgia. And he's getting all this love. Willie, you were giving this love too. Don't act like you weren't. You were giving him love because
I don't even know who you're talking about.
He told Donald Trump, I just need, you know who I'm talking about, I just need 11,780 votes. Just one more than I have so that we win the state of Georgia. And I stay president of the United States.
That's the guy he called on the phone.
Raffensperger's the guy he called.
Oh, okay, yeah, I know.
And of course, I've said this before. When these calls go on, they're rarely a call between one person and another person. There's usually other people on the call because you're taking notes. If it's an important call, you're taking notes. You want to be able to recall whatever it is that was discussed in that important phone call. So you have 1, 2, 3, or 4 other people that are on the phone listening to the call.
Right.
On both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Now you got to trust that all of those people, maybe 6 to 8 people who heard the phone call, would all keep it in confidence. But you know how dirt is, right? Dirt always wants to show off.
Well, somebody will said, don't tell nobody, but yeah.
Dirt always wants to show off. I don't care what you do. If you're doing something dirty, you can just promise yourself, if you do something dirty, somebody's going to tell on you.
I think it's a human nature conscious that when they know something ain't quite right, they got to get that to somebody else. They got to.
So somebody told somebody who ultimately got it to somebody in the news media that Donald Trump had said this and actually had made a recording of the phone call.
He made a recording of it. Wow.
So you actually get to hear Donald Trump and Brad Raffensperger talking on their phone call.
Wow.
So you can't say that somebody misunderstood,
right? Because
you get to hear it for yourself what was actually said. And we only hear about the snippets of the couple of comments that they're promoting on the media in the news. But the call itself was like a 45 to 60-minute phone call. So there was a lot more stuff that was said that if you heard the entire conversation, it would be very clear to you that Donald Trump was doing everything he could to pressure the Secretary of State of the state of Georgia to illegally create 11,780 votes for Donald Trump.
Any means necessary.
By any means necessary, right? Yep. So now Raffensperger would seem like he's the hero in all of this. And he's taken on the hero's role. He walks around with a sword. He
does seem like a kind of hero because he didn't do it.
They got you fooled.
Wow.
Let me help you with the rest of the story.
Yeah, help me, Mr.
See, because
Hare.
you just heard Raffensperger's part of the
I
story.
heard the surface, and it seemed like he was pretty good to me.
So according to him, he said that the 2020 election in Georgia was fair and secure, and there had been no evidence of foul play to back up any of the former president's claims.
Right.
That's what he said.
Right.
So if the election was already fair and the election was already secure and there was no evidence of any foul play in Georgia, why did you change the election law?
Oh, he's the one that recently did that?
See, so, they didn't tell you about this part.
Oh, wow.
After the election was over, in 2021, when they're doing all of the, responses to the election.
Wow.
So you got the Trumpers and whatnot saying, well, the problem here, the reason why we lost Georgia was, now I'm making this part up.
Oh, okay. All right.
This part I'm making up.
And I'm believing every word you say.
Right. Well, you might believe it, but I'm making this part up.
Okay.
That the reason why they wanted to change the election law was because too many black people were voting.
Well, that's true.
I told you once I told you you would believe it anyway, right? Now, how does Nate Hare come to the conclusion that they were trying to find a way to reduce the number of black people that were voting? Because all of the counties and jurisdictions that Donald Trump tried to get votes changed in or have the election law changed in a way that would compromise the number of people that were able to vote were all black districts.
Right.
Places like Detroit, where almost 100% of the people in the county that Detroit is in, I think it's Wayne County or something that Detroit is in, almost 100% of the vote or 90% of the vote are African people. He says there's a problem with the operation of the election, but the only places that he was saying that we needed to have the votes overturned were in the places that were like 50, 60, 70% or more majority black voters.
Right.
So I'm saying to you that my belief is, based on what we see, is that all of these changes in election law that have been done around the country were focused primarily on finding ways to reduce the number of people who they feel would not vote for somebody like Donald Trump, to reduce their numbers.
So Raffensperger basically said, I couldn't do it then because it'd be illegal, but
and they would know me.
Right, they would know who I am, but here's what we can go do forward. That way it'll be legal.
I can't help you with November 23rd, 2020. I can't do that. That's too heavy a lift for me.
We'll set up something different so you can do that later.
Right. So tomorrow you can do this, okay?
Right. Wow.
And so what are the things that they decided to do? I mean, just so you understand what we're talking about.
I'm understanding now.
So the things they decided to do in changing Georgia's election law is, one, they added new identification requirements for absentee voting. Now, I want us to understand what that means. When you get an absentee ballot, it means you are already a registered voter. Mm-hmm. We're all clear on that, right?
Right.
In order for you to be a registered voter, you had to physically go to an election office, bring in your application, and give them whatever identification that they required in order to verify that you are who you say you are. Mm-hmm. That was done when you were accepted as a registered voter. So when they send out an absentee ballot, why would you have to send a copy of your driver's license, your social security card, your birth certificate, your marriage license, et cetera, all these kind of things, in addition to just responding to the absentee ballot, where you're going to have your signature in two places, which is going to send the ballot back to your election office. They're going to compare your signature on your absentee ballot that you return with the signature they have on file. And if they match, they're going to send your ballot through. If they don't match, they're going to send you a note telling you that we don't understand whether you're who you say you are because your signature doesn't match what we have on file. That's the system that's been set up, that's been working famously for over 150 years. Mm. But it didn't work famously if Donald Trump didn't win it, because Donald Trump told you that if I don't win, then it means that the election was corrupt. Mm. Even if I win, if I don't win by a lot, it means the election was corrupt. And so when Donald Trump didn't win, in fact, even a couple of days before he the election was over, he was already complaining that the election was corrupt because he suspected that he wasn't going to win. So if Raffensperger believed that the election on November 3rd, 2020 was fair, secure, and there was no evidence of foul play, why would you change the election law, adding this new provision, new ID requirements for absentee voting? What does having new ID requirements for absentee voting raise up as a possible problem? Number one, it means you got steps you got to go through that you didn't have to go through before. The more steps, the more opportunity there is for something to go wrong on your application or on your absentee ballot. If you have to present additional ID, you have to go someplace and get the ID copied or scanned, and then attach that to your absentee ballot return, and then hope that they don't disconnect them. You know, because sometimes you got 2 pages to a document that only had 1 page that was important information, and the other page winds up getting separated. And then you don't have the absentee ballot identification stuff is not attached to the absentee ballot. Whose responsibility is that? You know for sure, and it's going to be the responsibility of the voter, who doesn't even know that that problem occurred until after the election is over.
Right.
Doesn't know that their vote didn't count until after the election was over. So you're creating all of these additional steps and then these additional documents that you don't need because you already have those documents. Adding this provision that you have to have these additional ID documents to add to your absentee ballot means that those people that don't have a driver's license have to go get 2 or 3 other kinds of ID. Remember, when you registered to vote, they had like a Class A set of documents that you only needed 1 of. You had a Class B set of documents that you needed 2 of, and you had a Class 3 set of documents that you needed, I think, 3 of, or there's some scenario, for that documentation. That's because all documentation is not as provenly authentic. A driver's license is provenly authentic. You can go look up the driver's number. You can see the signature of the driver, on the driver's license. You got all of this identifying information. So you can have just one document, a visa, a passport, your driver's license, any one of those things, good enough for you to be able to register to vote with no other ID.
Right.
If you don't have one of those kind of IDs, you got to have some other magic stuff, right? So you got to have, marriage license and birth certificates and, 3 notices from your gas station that you pay utility bill to, and that sort of stuff. And if you don't have any of that, because you're not the person who pays the utility bill, and you don't have a driver's license, and you're not married, right? Where do you go to get these secondary, pieces of identification? Your library card, your school ID card when you registered for school, assuming that you registered in the same city that you're trying to vote in right now. It becomes a very, complicated process for something that really is not necessary. You had already gone through that process to register to vote in the first place. If they accepted your registration, you've proven that you are who you are.
Right.
Adding all of these additional steps is to create complexity, because the people who have the least amount of means are going to people that are going to have the least amount of ability to comply with all of these different protocols that you are setting up. The new law also removes, interestingly enough, the Secretary of State as the chair of Georgia's state election board, which allows in the case of Georgia, allows the Republican majority board to take over local election offices temporarily. The secretary, too, can no longer send out absentee ballot applications to all voters, which Raffensperger had done. And remember, November 3rd, 2020 is in the pandemic year. And the one thing you didn't want to have people in the pandemic year doing is touching each other. So everything you could do to meet the required things that had to be done in the society, you had to figure out a way to do them with the least amount of human contact possible.
Right.
So sending out absentee ballots to every registered voter allowed each voter to say, well, I don't need to go into the election office if I can send in an absentee ballot. Now, all voters aren't going to do that, but it lowers the number of people who are making physical contact with each other, therefore lowering the number of people that are exposing themselves to COVID-19. That was supposed to be a good deal. Because the election was run so cleanly everywhere around the country, you had the most secure, cleanest, least amount of any election foul play or any fraud and whatnot in the election in the history of the country. This was by Donald Trump's own hired forensic specialist who said that this was the cleanest, safest, problem-free election that they had ever had in the history of them keeping up with this stuff. So why would you change the election law in 2021 if the election in November 3rd of 2020 was so pristine, so clean, so well run, so problem free? Why would you change any of that? Why wouldn't you just build on that?
Right.
So one of the steps is that they in Georgia, they removed the Secretary of State Raffensperger as chair of Georgia's state election board. So then who's the problem solver? Who's the driver of the administration of the election in Georgia? Well, that driver becomes a board that didn't exist at the time. They had to create this board that would take over the election offices temporarily. And of course, since the Republicans controlled both the state assembly and the state senate, they're going to appoint their own Republican players to be on this board. And those players are going to be people that are likely going to go whatever way the leader of the Republican Party goes. And the leader of the Republican Party is Donald Trump. So whatever he says you should do, that's what you're going to wind up doing.
Right.
The secretary can no longer send out, as I indicated, the absentee ballots. This unelected board is not really, this is quoting the article that I had been reviewing, which was written by Chris Kenning, writing for USA Today. This was just prior to the indictment, the fourth indictment of Donald Trump. He says the unelected board is not really accountable to anyone but the General Assembly. The General Assembly is the joint session of the Georgia State Assembly and the Georgia State Senate. He said, you'll never be able to hold anyone accountable. Everyone's going to be pointing fingers at each other. So if something goes wrong and you end up with people whose votes don't get counted, you have people that were denied the opportunity to register. You had people that didn't have access to a polling place because you had closed the polling places, or you changed the hours that the polling places were open and whatnot. All those things that tend to go on when you start tinkering with a process that already works. When you start trying to solve those problems, if ultimately you have to go to this Republican-appointed election board doesn't have any elected people on it. It's just people that are friends and and family of whoever rules the parties that control the state legislature. In this case, it would be the Republicans in the state of Georgia. If that's how that process works, then you are guaranteed that you're going to have misconduct and that you're not going to have anybody you can hold accountable for it because nobody's employed. Right. The people who make up the board are volunteers appointed by the leaders of the state senate and the state assembly, and there's no consequence. Where you can't fire a person who's not been hired. Right. You can't unelect a person who's not been elected, and so on. So they create the ability for misconduct to occur and for there to be no consequences for the misconduct. when the new law significantly, according to Chris Kenning's article, the new law significantly limits the number of ballot drop boxes compared with last year. Now, we talked about this, Willie, many times during the course of the 2020 election. The drop boxes is again, like the absentee ballots, was a measure that was established to minimize the amount of human contact with people to people,
Right.
To minimize that, so we wouldn't spread this virus any more than was absolutely necessary.
Right.
And so the drop boxes were everywhere. Everywhere there was an election office, there was a drop box. So you could, whenever you just got around to it, drop your ballot in the drop box. You don't have to trust the post office. Just drop it in the drop box and move on.
Right.
So to give you an example of what I mean by them reducing the number of drop boxes, the state of Georgia, the city of Atlanta has almost 500,000 people live in the city of Atlanta. In the county that Atlanta is in, Fulton County, there are 1.06 million people that live in the Fulton County. The drop boxes were dropped from 38 drop boxes serving that population to 8 drop boxes serving that population. So now you only had a drop box for every 130,000 people in the county of Fulton.
Wow.
You can see how reduced the utility is of those drop boxes.
So so they're setting up their strategy. It's already been set up.
Right. Because remember, the Republicans play to win. Democrats play to play. So Democrats can do stuff and they love to show off. Yep, this is what we did. Ha ha ha. Look, great things we did. But if it doesn't track, if it doesn't take root, if it doesn't stick, they just come back later on and say, see, there's these terrible Republicans over there, and they're the reason why this stuff didn't stick. We'll have to do this again. Democrats like to play.
Right.
Republicans don't play.
They don't play. They so what are we going to do to be able to
we're
get
gonna
our outcome?
We're going to change the game so it can never go any other way than our way.
And they'll tell you, oh, we're going to do this for you. It's going to be good for you. And meanwhile, they're setting up their strategy.
And I took a lot of this from an article written by Elisa, how do you say it? Elisa Chang, Chang, and Emma Bowman. This was in an article written for NPR, where the article's title was Georgia Secretary of State says new voting law restores confidence. If the election that took place on November 3rd of 2020 was the most secure, safest, problem-free election in the history of the United States, based on Republicans being the ones doing that assessment, if that was the case, then how would you be restoring confidence to something that you already have confidence in? If it's already safe, it's already problem-free, and so on, then you have confidence in something that has proven to you that it works.
Right.
What you would do is establish what you were doing that works as your permanent process. Right. So how would changing what was already working to something that you don't have any idea whether it will work or it looks like it'll work worse, why would that make you have more confidence? Because the only thing that gives these people like Raffensperger and his crew confidence in Republicans in these Republican-held jurisdictions confidence is if the process works for them.
Right. I would think Ratzenberger had the same face because I'm sure to his Republican colleagues or Trump supporters, he didn't look so good. So basically,
they were throwing rocks at his house.
So he said, "I got to do something."
Yep, he was getting death threats.
Do something.
He says, "Oh, death threats! You're going to kill me? What I got to do? You need me to cheat? Yeah. I'll cheat now.
I'll set something up.
Okay,
so we'll be able to get done what you wanted done, Mr. Trump."
So returning to Chris Kenning's article, I know we got a couple minutes in this segment. Raffensperger was on the receiving end of the phone call that I talked about. I just want to find 11,780 votes. So Raffensperger, his office was decorated with a patriotic eagle, a painting that had been given to him after he stood up to Trump's pressure. His state, he contended, emerged with elections that are even more secure and accessible, not explaining why he had to change the election law that was already secure and stable. As Raffensperger spoke, just one floor above him, speakers had filled the state election board meeting to overcapacity. Suspicious of the Dominion-made voting machines, because Donald Trump attacked the Dominion-made voting machines.
Right.
That's the problem,
That's
right?
the problem, yeah.
And they lined up to demand paper ballots and says, until we can get rid of these machines, our winners are handpicked by a small group in this building.
Wow.
The reality is, if you have paper ballots, a small group of people in your building are being the ones who are deciding what the election is.
Right.
Right?
Right.
If you got ballots that are being run through a machine,
Right.
the machine is tabulating everything. All you got to do is read the tabulations and figure out who won.
Right.
Which do you think is the most likely to be tampered with? Come on now. They act like your head screws on and off, right? Yeah. About a mile from the Capitol at ground zero for these claims of election fraud is the State Farm Arena. That's where the election staff working around the clock at a vote tabulation center were then falsely accused of being election scammers. And you saw the two ladies, Miss Shea and I forgot the other woman's name, a mother and daughter grouping. They were accused of stashing votes and so on. They were handing each other some mints, or ginger snaps or something like that. And Giuliani claimed that they were passing voter data, between each other, like it was cocaine or heroin. Only because these are black women, they put it into that context.
And probably the masses believe it too.
Immediately. I mean, I think 99% of the Republicans in Georgia, were out there with their picket signs and their pitchforks and whatnot. Let's go get them. They actually went to these women's homes.
Yeah, that's
some went and claim, I'm here to help you, because the lynch mob is outside and they're going to do you in. You need to sign this document saying that you did this terrible stuff, and I'll get you skirted away where nobody will hurt you. Wow. That's the stuff that they were doing, right?
Man.
Who's gone to jail for that?
That's correct.
Now they know who did it.
Absolutely.
Why haven't any of these people been arrested and gone to jail for what they did?
Wow.
Okay. Well, that's because the people they did it to were these African American women.
Right.
If this had been to Euro-American white women, I guarantee you there would have been some judicial outcome already on this thing, right? So listen, the voting rights advocates say the election and its aftermath, this is the important thing, that the election and its aftermath left an enduring imprint on access, election politics, and simple trust in the state of Georgia. And you can see from what you've seen going on right now, it has left an imprint on the voting public of the United States as a whole. Now you have people that are suspicious of the voting process itself, not suspicious of the criminal people that were trying to manipulate the voting process. They get off the hook, they get a pass. The voting process itself, the institution of voting, that's what's being suspected as being insidious by many people in the American public. That's what Donald Trump left us as his legacy, a legacy of filth, of suspicion, of derision, and undermining of the basic institutions of the United States. Listen, we got to take a quick break. We'll talk to you on this side of the break here at Living for the People at 91.3 FM, WBNY.
And companions. They are our pets, our family, and they make life better. When we face unexpected challenges, so do our pets. That's why we're on a mission to support people and their pets. Whether donating a bag of kibble, sharing an Instagram post of a lost cat, or welcoming a foster pet into your home, every bit of kindness counts. Visit petsandpeopletogether.org to learn how to be a helper in your community. Brought to you by Maddie's Fund, the Humane Society of the United States, and the Ad Council.
Stay tuned for Talia Talks. We have a special audio interview exclusive starting right after Mr. Hare, 10 a.m. Talia Talks.
Latinas make history.
Ready for radio that's challenging, innovative, and encouraging? Tune in, Living for the People.
This is L. Nathan Hare. Join me right here, 91.3 FM WBNY. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 9 a.m. after Amy Goodman's Democracy Now! We'll provide objective analysis regarding current issues. Call 878-5104. It's Living for the People on 91.3 FM WBNY. All right, welcome back to Living for the People. This is L. Nathan here, your host. We're here with Willie H., who does the live streaming of the program. Welcome back, Willie.
Welcome, everybody, to Living for the People with L. Nathan Hare.
And so we're talking about the aftermath of the 2020, November 3rd, 2020 election, and all of the, in my view, misconduct that has taken place, all of the insidious conspiracies that have been mounted, that have undermined people's confidence in the basic systems of our society. This was spoken about. I was watching an MSNBC program, and a woman said something that was very prescient in my mind. She said that democracy works, the American democracy works not by force, it works by permission. I need for you to feel that, right? The only way that the American democracy can work is if the American people, as a people, are willing to submit themselves to the order of the American democracy. If the democracy says that you have to register, 1 day before an election, then you have to register 1 day before the election.
Right.
You can't register 2 minutes before the election. You have to register 1 day before the election.
Right.
Because that's what the system is. If the system says that you have to have a driver's license or a passport or a visa to have a one document verification of your identification, that's what you got to have. You might not like it, but that's what you got to have.
Right.
Right. If the system is that if somebody does something illegal that denies people, or even if it's only one person, the ability to vote, that all heck is going to rain down on you, because we have to have a voting system that works.
Right.
And the voting system only works if people can register, if people actually can register to vote, and then do register to vote, and then have the ability to vote, then actually do vote, and then actually have the votes that they make counted in the election.
To participate. And the Republicans, conservative, they got every angle covered. First of all, they're going to try to limit who votes and get people frustrated. People, talking about Biden and, he's no better, they all the same. And so to get those folks not to vote, it doesn't matter. And then the one that do know to vote, well, we even got a system to kind of get them out of the, if we need to change something, we could change that. So it's.
But remember, this system works if you give it permission to work.
Right.
If you decide that, well, I just don't believe in the American democracy anymore.
Right.
This two-party system, how do I know it doesn't work? Well, Joe Biden, he was named as a winner of the November 3rd, 2020 election. And I know he didn't win because I know that we would not have voted for him. So there must have been something wrong with the election. I dismissed the results of the election, and I align myself with Donald Trump and his forces to put them back into office. There are people in this country, and I'm not talking about 6 people.
Right.
I'm talking about maybe hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people in this country that would go along with that statement.
What frustrates me when I go to church or hear people in churches and they all gung ho for Trump, it's like, oh God.
And you still go to that church?
No, I don't go to that church, but churches that I go to, because I'm a Christian guy, so I go to other churches over here.
If they're talking like that, it's time to get another church. Right?
Yeah.
But my point is that the system of this country works based on permission. So in many other countries, we see this going on right now. They have presidential elections. People don't like whoever won the election, so they bring in their goons, their military police and whatnot, and they start killing people and put in whoever they want to be the new president, and then let that person get the money from selling the mineral rights to whatever it is they have in that country. That goes on. We see it happening all over the world.
Right.
It has not happened to this point in the United States.
Not physically,
so far,
but they're smart enough to come up with other ways.
Right. We've been on the edge, right, of all of that, but it has not happened. The reason why it doesn't happen is if somebody who was an elected president, they serve their 2 terms, or they serve 1 term, and then in the next term they don't get reelected. Mm-hmm. Then the administration has to change hands from one president to another president, from one administration to another administration. Mm-hmm. That could be ugly, or that could be something that is done with honor, with dignity, with integrity, with honesty, and that makes the country whole. Right. Even though the executive administration of the country changes, the country remains whole because we agree that everything that was filled in by me that makes up my executive administration of the country is going to be replaced by you and who you're going to put into those spaces. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to ensure that every person who is in the administration that I put together is going to talk to the person who's going to replace me from your administration, so that our information is shared and we keep the country in as highly integrated and continuous as possible. Mm-hmm. It's as seamless. That's the word I was looking for. As seamless as possible. That's what that's done by permission.
Right.
There's nothing in the law that says that has to be done. That's done by permission. Now, what happens if you have somebody who doesn't give that permission? Mm. Donald Trump didn't give information to the incoming Biden administration until 2 or 3 weeks before the January 20th of 2021 inauguration, because he was so insistent that he didn't lose the election that he wasn't willing to share information with the people that are going to be taking over the executive administration spots that he was vacating. He wasn't willing to cede that information to them. What should have been happening is, if you were the Secretary of the Treasury, and Joe Biden's going to have his own, Janet Yellen's going to be his new Secretary of the Treasury, then your Secretary of the Treasury would meet with Biden's incoming Secretary of the Treasury, and you would share information. You would make sure that the Trump administration person got all of the information that was knowable to the incoming Biden administration, so that there's no gaps, there's no shortfalls in terms of people not doing things because they didn't know it needed to be done. Mm-hmm. That's what our American democracy is based on. When that doesn't work, then everything has to be done by force. Or you got to act as if every time there's a new administration, you have to act like the world was just born this morning, and you have to recreate everything all over again. That can't be the way, the organized best way to run the American democracy. So I just want us to understand this is the legacy of the Trump administration. What went on in Afghanistan is an example of what I'm talking about. What happened in Afghanistan? In February of 2020, Donald Trump had met with the Taliban, or not him personally, but his people met with the Taliban in Afghanistan, and they came up with a deal where they were going to give that they were going to hand over Afghanistan to the Taliban, and there were a number of things the Taliban said that they were going to do in terms of women being able to go to school, to be able to work, to not have to wear these masks over their faces, and all these things that they said they had negotiated. But then Trump lost the election.
Mm-hmm.
He signed a treaty with the government of Afghanistan, but he lost the election.
Right.
So he sat on the treaty and what was in the treaty, what he had worked out with the Afghan Taliban and so on, and what he had worked out, if anything, about how they were going to help those people that had worked for the Americans in Afghanistan, who were going to be suspicious or looked at suspiciously by the Taliban government. What were you going to do for those people? Are you going to have a route to get those people out, to send them back or to send them to the United States or someplace else?
Mm-hmm.
You knew that needed to be done, but the Trump people hadn't worked that out.
Wow.
Because they felt like, well, we always got time to do that because we're still going to be in charge, in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
But you didn't win the election. You weren't in charge. But they left a hole in terms of the administration's sharing information so that the Biden administration was all the way on top of everything that had been worked out with the Taliban and Donald Trump, and then could have worked from that framework what they were going to do as far as getting people out of Afghanistan, and so on. But that wasn't done. Now, who took all of the blame for that? Biden took the blame for that.
Wow.
Donald Trump didn't take any blame for that.
Wow.
Even though the proof is in that they didn't do any real meetings to tell people until there was only a couple of weeks to go, if that, before the changeover of power. So there wasn't enough time to be able to get the administrations aligned so that you could have a smooth transition, and those things that needed to be sat on actually got sat on, going into the Biden administration. That's the negative outcome of not having the seamless transition, but it's also the legacy that Donald Trump has left us. He left us with a legacy where 40 to 45% of the people in this country don't trust the basic institutions of the government. Mm-hmm. How can you have Americans thinking that the FBI is a left-wing, a Democrat left-wing organization? How is that even possible? I mean, the most conservative and probably the most redneck type people in the country populate, the FBI, the Secret
agency,
Service, and all of these Defense Department people and whatnot. I mean, that's who you see. Right. How do you know? Well, whenever there's some kind of a conflict and you draw on these people, they're the ones that are snatching people by their hair and pummeling them, in front of television cameras. They're the ones that are putting nightsticks on people. They're the ones that are putting, balloons with razor wire in the water in the Mexican part of the Rio Grande, and seeing people get lacerated up and some die, and they facilitate or actually do these things.
Wow.
Left-wing people don't do stuff like that, right? So how can you even possibly assert that the FBI is some bastion of liberal ideology? That's just insane. Yet 40 to 45% of the people in this country, because Donald Trump said it, they believe it. People who they had counted on to be Lone Ranger, the Texas, Rangers and whatnot, that they thought that's where their crew, because Donald Trump says, no, they're not our crew anymore, because they did what? They actually administered the law.
They did what was right.
So this is where we are right now. The state also has allowed one of the changes that Raffensperger has allowed to be put into Georgia election law is unlimited citizen challenges to other people's voter registrations. Now, just wear that for a second. That means that you as an individual can challenge any not only anybody, any number of anybody's. You could challenge their voter registration.
Right.
Now, what do you have to produce to challenge your voter registration? That's not specified.
Wow.
So you can challenge the voter registration by just saying, I challenge that person's registration. I don't think that person's a registered voter.
So, Mr. Hare, what you're saying, the upcoming election is going to be a mess no matter what happens.
Especially in Georgia, right? So now, and in fact, what they said, this is me, I'm just reading from the article that Chris Kennings provided for us. He says that the right-wing activists filed so many voter registration challenges already in 2021, had already filed so many voter registration challenges that they swamped some of the election offices. Election offices also were prohibited from getting any funding from any outside sources. So if you had a citizen group that was going to try to help the election offices to have more capacity, you wouldn't be allowed to do that.
And they want that so they could get
and then they underfund the election offices so that they make them even less capable.
So they could come in and do what they have to do.
This is the legacy of the Trump administration. He says a lot of this really goes back to the big lie. This is Chris Kenning's article. A lot of this goes back to the big lie, the idea that something was wrong with our election and our electoral system, and it has to change. And of course, we all know that that's not true. This is according to Michael Kreis, who is a Georgia State University election law professor. He goes on to say that yet major pieces of public policy have been shifted in response to this lie. So outside of an Atlanta coffee shop, this fellow, Richard Barron, recalled the night that he got a text from a reporter asking him how he felt about the election. Donald Trump, then the outgoing president, had held a rally in Valdosta, Georgia, to support the Republican in the hotly contested runoff election for the state Senate seat. He had fired off a false conspiracy theory, or a series of theories about stolen elections and voter fraud, and he had flashed Barron's picture on the big screen. Now, Barron was at a coffee shop in Atlanta.
Wow.
Having, what do people drink in coffee shops?
Coffee.
Oh, coffee.
Yeah.
He was in a coffee shop drinking coffee.
Wow.
And somehow they took his picture and put it up along with this diatribe about conspiracy theories of stolen elections and voter fraud, and flashed his picture in this assertion, even though he had nothing to do with it.
Wow.
I'm not even sure that Richard Barron voted, in that election, right? He says, and then he said there came a flood of threats.
Wow.
One message warned Barron that he would be served lead. He said, and this is quoting Barron now. He says, that's when I really started getting harassment. He says, I finally called a police officer to stay outside my house so that I could sleep in. I couldn't even go to sleep.
Wow.
He said, and it's not just as if Barron, who was Fulton County's elections director, it's not as if he had never been in battle before. He led the department during the 2018 governor's race, where Stacey Abrams, you all heard about that. Right. Stacey Abrams narrowly lost to then Secretary of State Brian Kemp. Officials rejected hundreds of absentee ballots in that election, and Democrats claim voter suppression. Lawsuits continue to go on from the 2018 election that have not been settled yet. But the following year, Georgia purchased, this was in 2021, 2019, Georgia purchased a new voting system made by a company that became a household name, the Dominion Voting Systems, right?
Dominion Power, that's a church.
Right. He said the year after that, the COVID-19 pandemic put mail-in ballots into broad use. Meanwhile, the stakes of elections in Georgia were mounting. When Biden narrowly won Georgia in November, the first Democrat to win the state since 1992, Trump quickly alleged fraud. And among his targets were Fulton County, the state's most populous county. After Trump demanded a hand count a statewide hand count, and a subsequent recount, all of which found Biden had won by almost 12,000 votes. Trump's claims of fraud continue. And there were allegations of manipulated ballots, fraud, supposed breached election equipment. Soon the likes of Rudolph Giuliani and White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows were visiting Georgia, trying to get proof that these terrible things had occurred. Meetings with Georgia lawmakers that December, Giuliani played surveillance footage that included two of Barron's employees. This is the two women I was talking about before, Ruby Freeman and her daughter, Wandrea Shea Moss, while they were counting ballots. Giuliani said that the footage showed the women surreptitiously passing around USB ports as if they were vials of heroin or cocaine. And of course, the record shows that what they actually were passing were ginger mints. I don't even know what a ginger mint is, but I'm pretty sure that's not illegal for you to be passing a ginger mint from one person to another.
Wow.
Trump, in his famous phone call, would falsely call Freeman an election scammer at least 18 times in that phone call. I know we only got a couple of minutes left. Forced these women to leave their homes. Why isn't anybody in jail over that?
Right. Absolutely.
They were forced out of their homes.
Yep.
Nothing done for them. Has anybody given them a check?
Right.
Shouldn't they get a check of $300,000-$400,000 for just pain and irritation?
Reputation was stained, and
all of that
had to do harassment, all that. Wow.
What's her name? Moss. I forget her first name. Was it Shea Moss? Wandrea Shea Moss. She received messages wishing death on her, telling her that she was going to be in jail with her mother, and saying things like, be glad it's 2020 and not 1920.
Ooh.
Okay?
Wow.
I mean, this is how raw this thing was.
Wow.
She said, I heard her on TV, she said that she could not feel safe anywhere. Everywhere she went, she felt unsafe.
Wow.
This has been going on since February of 2021.
Unbelievable.
Everywhere she has gone, she feels unsafe. Okay.
Wow.
So I just wanted to present this understanding to us all that there are consequences. It's not just, they were pushing paper or, this was just a little bit of electoral misconduct. This is, different people in different parties, fussing with each other and doing, this is not that. This is changing the fundamental character of how America governs itself as a democracy. This has got to stop. This has to be fixed. And whatever consequences need to fall on people who did these things, those consequences should fall and fall quickly.
Right.
So that we repair the damage that has been done and we have a democracy that we can count on in the future. Thank you all for listening to us and supporting us. We have a show that's coming on.
Talia Talks, baby.
Talia Talks. And she's going to be talking. She even invited me to say it in Spanish. She says, Yo hablo de negocios, which I believe is let's talk business. All right, we'll see you all in just a few minutes with Talia Rodriguez. See you then.